Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for our live video today. My name is Gabby, and I am here with two very special guests here to discuss how Boys Town led America towards racial and religious inclusion, and more specifically, how Father Edward Flanagan kind of spearheaded that effort. So we're here with Heather and Tom. Heather is on the other side of Tom here. Most of you know Tom from our Hall of History, but we'll have you both introduce yourselves if you are a new watcher of our Boys Town live videos, starting with Heather.
Yeah, hi everybody. Gabby, thank you so much for having me. And Tom, it's so great to see you again. My name is Heather Fryer. I am speaking to you today from Hakalau, Hawaii, where I'm kind of an oral historian and filmmaker in residence. I do work with multi-ethnic communities in Hawaii to uncover their histories of inclusion and resilience, and to help people tell stories of kind of their old life ways so that we have that wisdom for the present. But before that, I was an Omahaan from 2004 to 2021. I taught at Creighton University, so some of you out there, I may have crossed paths with you that way, in the history department and the program in American Studies. And now I, in addition to working with communities here, do freelance historical work. I help people find their family histories, their community histories, and I coach writers and other people who want to do that kind of work. But it's so nice to be back with you. I have a very, very, very affectionate tie to Boys Town because thanks to Tom, I had the opportunity while I was at Creighton to work on Father Flanagan's biography as part of the team for his cause for canonization. And that's a story that I love to tell anytime I get the chance. So thanks for this opportunity.
Awesome. Well, it's great to have you on. And then Tom, tell us more about yourself and your long history with Boys Town.
Hello, my name is Tom Lynch. I'm coming from Boys Town today. Actually, it's sunny and very warm at Boys Town today. It's 75 degrees here. We're breaking a record. And it's my honor to join both Heather and yourself talking about Father Flanagan's ideas, inclusion and diversity. I've been with Boys Town for 39 years. I came right out of college as a employee here in the museum. And part of my job was organizing the archives at Boys Town. So for many years, I've worked with the papers of Father Flanagan, organizing them, sharing them with the public, and discussing his unique concepts and theories on inclusion, which were very revolutionary for his day, and even today are still groundbreaking in what he did. And it's been a privilege to be here at Boys Town these years, meeting individuals who lived here at Boys Town and went through the program and see the impact it had on their lives. So thank you for allowing me to join you today.
Wonderful. Well, it's great to have you both on, and we are going to go through several discussion questions here during this video that we have outlined. If you're tuning in live and you have a question for Heather or Tom over anything that we discuss, go ahead and leave it in the comments. Make sure you like this video, and if you're watching it later on, maybe tonight or within the next few days, go ahead and give it a share so more people can learn more about this incredible story we're about to tell. So with that, February is Black History Month, which is an excellent time to have a discussion on how Father Flanagan and Boys Town have really played their parts in helping to move America towards racial and religious equality and inclusion. So Tom, to understand, how Father Flanagan and Boys Town really contributed to this, we need to first start at the beginning. So tell us more about what the social climate was like in Omaha around race and religion at the time that Boys Town was founded back in 1917.
When Father Flanagan came to America, he was an Irish immigrant. He was 18 years old, and he came to America to get away from discrimination based on his race and religion in Ireland, because it was an English colony and they considered him, being Irish and speaking the local dialect and being a Roman Catholic, as being a foreign individual, even in his home country. So he grew up witnessing that type of behavior or discrimination. And when it came to Omaha in 1917, it was a very segregated city. There were pockets throughout the city where different ethnic groups lived. And within these ethnic groups, you stayed in your neighborhood, you worshiped there, you shopped there. Very rarely would people cross the lines going to different neighborhoods Then it also is a community based on social class too. Certain individuals own majority of wealth in the city, and majority of people were new immigrants coming in, working in meatpacking plants and on the railroads. So they really didn't have much access to wealth or political power. So it was a very strange community Father Flanagan came to in 1917. And he discovered very quickly that it was a community where if you were poor, you were homeless, no one really cared or wanted you. And especially that applied to children. When he saw the children on the streets in downtown Omaha, he realized no one wanted these children, and they were especially boys, because girls usually be taken in to be servants. But he discovered the lowest individuals in the Omaha community in 1917 were these homeless boys living on the streets, many of them from different races and religions. In America at the time, they had the idea of eugenics. Eugenics said certain individuals superior to others. And unfortunately, the bottom of the rung would be these children who came from different countries from around the world, spoke different languages. Their families maybe did not meet the social norm for the day, so they are considered the lowest of the low. And so that's the atmosphere Father Flanagan came into Omaha in 1917.
Yeah. And so because those tensions were so high around having boys of all different races, religions, and backgrounds live together in one common area, our founder, Father Edward Flanagan, he really took a courageous step, and he went on to create his own town. So Tom, tell us more about the move to Overlook and how impactful this was at a time where integration was so widely unaccepted.
Back in 1917, Father Flanagan created Boys Town, and he took in the first group of children, and he stated he would accept any child, regardless of race, religion, to live with him. And he had several buildings in the city. He had one on 25th and Dodge Street, which in downtown Omaha. He moved to another facility on 13th Street in the southern part of the city of Omaha, but that was a rented building. And about 1920, the people who owned the facility said they wanted to use it for different purposes. He needed to move on. He went throughout the city of Omaha to look for a new location. Everywhere he went, he encountered people not wanting him to move into the community. He actually made plans to buy a former Protestant seminary to move in there. And we have the newspaper articles from the collection where 7 local churches and ministers came together and said they did not want Father Flanagan and his boys in their neighborhood due to the fact that children were of different races and religions, and Father Flanagan being a Catholic priest, that they did not want a Catholic priest in their neighborhood. So Father Flanagan in that atmosphere said, well, I'm going to move to the country where I'll be free and independent to do whatever I want to. So in 1920, later in that year, he bought land where the current village of Boys Town is located. It was 10 miles from the city of Omaha. There was nothing here except farmland. He could come out and establish his community, be totally free and independent. And when he moved the boys here, he could only afford one truck. So all the little boys got the ride on the truck to come west. And the older boys had to walk to their new home. It took them 9 hours to march from the city to their new home. But once they were here, they were free and independent, and he could have any type of programming he wanted. But what he did from the very beginning, though, and the entrance to the village of Boys Town, he put a sign saying, all races, all creeds, welcome to live in my village. So from the very beginning, that was what he wanted the public to realize what Boys Town stood for.
Mm-hmm. So Heather, when you were learning about all of this incredible background and what a important event that this was, because it was just never done before, tell us more about your work on Father Flanagan's More Perfect Union, pushing the frontiers of racial and religious inclusion at Boys Town. What inspired you to write this beyond the history?
It's probably 2015 or so that I was working with Tom and some other people on writing the biography of Father Flanagan. Yeah. And most people, I think of, and reasonably think of Father Flanagan as a real pioneer in child welfare, which he absolutely was. But, I came to this with a background of having written pretty extensively on the history of race and racial discrimination, social movements, and especially the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II. And as I was working on the biography, one of the things that came out in our conversations and in what I was seeing in the records was that Boys Town was so incredibly integrated. Like, I was noticing things like, it was fairly common to have maybe a community that was integrated, but what integration meant was that people were brought together and they lived in separate areas because segregation was still seen as the norm. This wasn't what I was seeing. I was seeing photographs and images of boys at Boys Town where everybody was completely integrated and all together. And this really started to get my radar pinging.
Yeah.
I said a little bit about this in the biography that went into the cause, but I kind of put this on the back burner because I thought it is possible. I wanted to do some checking, but it is possible that Boys Town was the first place in the United States where people of all races of religions were not just accepted or tolerated, but where the baseline expectation was that everybody would live together as citizens, as family, as Americans. And after doing quite a bit of checking, I am very confident that this is our first fully integrated community in the United States. And integrated meaning that there is kind of an ethos of people of all races and creeds belong here because, as Tom said, Father Flanagan experienced racial and religious discrimination himself, but also because of the way that Father Flanagan understood the growth and development of children. Where his counterpart in Council Bluffs was saying that children are just biologically bad seeds, right? The throwaway children that Tom was talking about. And he's talking about children of color, Catholics, Jews, right? These are just throwaway people. Father Flanagan was saying, you know, the problem really is what he called the foul seed of prejudice that didn't just prevent those boys who were discriminated against from growing into their God-given gifts and talents, but also white children, because it created narrow-minded and kind of internally almost violent, not peaceful, and not able to build a good America. His thinking was so forward-looking. If you think about the fact that Father Flanagan passed away in 1948, 1948 was the year that President Truman desegregated the armed forces, which was the beginning of formal desegregation in American life. And that to me is remarkable, that before there was all of that, there was Father Flanagan just living it out.
Mm-hmm. Would you add anything, Tom?
I think Heather is correct. Totally. I mean, this was a unique community. We have former boys telling us they arrived from all different parts of America, and they'd be shocked because they'd walk them into a dormitory and they say, okay, you're going to live in this dormitory with these boys. And they saw boys of different races, religions. They had never encountered that before. And it took them a few days to accept that. But after a while, they realized they're just kids just like them. And everybody got along and worked together. So it was eye-opening for a lot of these men. And they went home to their communities and shared those views with their families and friends there, saying, why are we discriminating against this individual due to the race or religion? I just at Boys Town knew someone of that race and religion. They're a beautiful human being. I loved them as my brother.
Mm-hmm. I love what you said too, Heather, about, you know, it wasn't just tolerated, but it was encouraged and it was expected that when you came to Boys Town, you know, Father outlined it as this is how it is and there's not a way around it. And if you're at Boys Town, this is how we do it. And like Tom said, you know, it didn't seem so out of the ordinary for those that were there because it was their norm.
It was. And I think there's such a wonderful model even for today, because let's be honest, you know, we're still trying to work out what true inclusion and true equity looks like. And in some ways, Father Flanagan achieved it by not overemphasizing it.
Mm-hmm.
He had a leadership style that was just about doing what was right. You know, he sort of set his course and said, we have a real trouble in this country with prejudice that undercuts our values as American citizens. You know, Father Flanagan is a very committed Catholic. He was also very committed to American values, and he talked about that as American values. Mm-hmm. And because of that, he just set the stage for what inclusion would look like, right? So, you have the beautiful Dowd Chapel, but you also have a Jewish temple. You also have services for Protestants. Boys come in and no one is really talking about what race, religion, what their ethnicity is. But at the same time, Father Flanagan will let you know that he was a proud Irish Catholic man. He did not pretend that he wasn't Irish.
Mm-hmm.
And he encouraged the boys to do the same. They had events, for example, in school where it would be like a League of Nations or a United Nations, right? And all of the boys were encouraged to speak from the perspective of their own, racial or ethnic group.
Right.
And this was a place where everybody understood that people had different backgrounds. And yet that was not relevant because the larger point at Boys Town is to create great young men who can create a great world for the rest of us. And that's a very easy principle to buy into. And there's no place for prejudice there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Heather, in your article, you made a point to mention that, Father Flanagan could have easily made racial equality someone else's concern, someone else's problem. But as our incredible founder is up for sainthood, explain how this was such a testament to who Father Flanagan was as a person.
I think that there are several dimensions to this. I think that the baseline dimension probably is that if a child was suffering, or if Father Flanagan was in a position to prevent a child from suffering and becoming someone whose suffering stayed with them their whole life, and then their talents were wasted, he was going to intervene.
Yeah.
But there's also a really interesting political and social principle here too. Prior to the civil rights movement, and even during the civil rights movement, the thinking was what pertained to the well-being of, we'll say Black people, because it's Black History Month, was for Black people to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if you're concerned about the welfare of Black children, that's a problem for Black people. White people don't need to be concerned about this. Racial prejudice, religious discrimination, that's not a problem for us. Father Flanagan made that, I would say, as much a matter of his work in the world as child welfare, because the two were very intricately tied. If you can't accept a person for their humanity, if you can't see past that, then we can't do anything for our children because we're going to keep injuring them through discrimination, whether they are the child who's discriminated against or the child who learns the lie of discrimination and carries with them the foul seed into the next generation. So I think that this really speaks to an insight that is more mainstream today, but for him, it's very hard to know where it would have come from were it not from a very deep faith that turned out a lot of the noise of the time and place that he was living in. He was involved in politics, but he didn't accept the framework that society is set up by different races of people who are inferior and superior to one another, nor did he have the belief that people who did not practice Catholicism were in some way not worthy or part of our society or the world that we're trying to create together. And I think that's not an intellectual thing. I think that's something else. And maybe I would leave that to my theology colleagues to speak to what that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Tom, what would you add?
I would add that everything Heather said is so true. And Father Flanagan considered racial discrimination and religious discrimination as a cancer on American society. He described that. And he said children learn that when they're younger, and that he actually gave it an age. He said by about age 10, a child can be made racist. That's why at Boys Town we talk about teach love. And that's what he advocated here, teaching children love. If you teach children from an early age to accept everyone, regardless of race, religion, you're going to have a society where everyone lives together in harmony. And that's what he witnessed here at Boys Town with the thousands of boys that came to live with him, how race had sometimes ruined the lives of some of these children, because not all children could stay here. They would come and not accept their fellow students here of different races and religions. And Father would not allow them to stay then. He said, if you are going to come here and cause trouble and not accept the fellow students, then you cannot stay here at Boys Town.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in live. I see we've got a number of viewers both on Facebook and Instagram. So please make sure you double tap and like this video. And if you have any questions as we continue to chat, please leave them in the comments. Okay, so, Heather, you mentioned this through your research. You found out that today, Father Flanagan's original home for boys and the current village of Boys Town have been named one of the first intentionally integrated communities in the United States. So, Tom, would you give us a little bit of background of what that means?
What that means is Father Flanagan created a community here that is a role model for the rest of the United States, because it's a community that's been here for 100 years, and it shows how children can come and live together, and even adults, because the staff here is a very diverse staff at Boys Town, even in Father Flanagan's time. As Heather mentioned, the Japanese Americans who were interned, they actually came and lived here with the kids in the village of Boys Town and were trusted employees. And Father Flanagan welcomed them as their equals when they came to live here. And so it's a community that people visit every year and exists in the city of Omaha, and people drive by us every day. And I don't think they quite realize the uniqueness of our community of Boys Town that we have here, that this is an example of how America can function as a unit and as a family together. And that's exactly what Father Flanagan wanted. He wanted this to be a role model for the rest of the United States, if not the world, on racial and religious tolerance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And integrating that community was no easy feat for Father Flanagan, as we've discussed. Tom, what other challenges occurred after the move to Overlook?
After the move to Overlook, the home faced financial trouble, because Father Flanagan accepted no funding from any religious organization or community program because of their policies, because they would say children had to be raised a certain way, following a certain faith, or you could only serve certain children. Maybe children of a certain race would not be accepted at the time in the program. And Father Flanagan said, no, I'm only going to accept donations from the American public that really want to support me. And we have some of his fundraising campaigns here, and he would put pictures of the children who lived here. And one gentleman wrote in saying he objected to the fact that there were African-American children here. And Father wrote back saying, you're not a very good American if you think that, because I'm going to serve all children, and you have to get a better attitude on how you look at children and how your fellow American citizens. So he had issues with working with schools too, because sometimes the school administration state of Nebraska did not like his schools because he had totally integrated schools, both for religion and race at the time. So they would come out and put extra kind of limits on what he could do to have a school here and with teaching and different subjects. So it was, he had incidents where people would come and try to stop him. Even the Ku Klux Klan at different times objected to what Father Flanagan did with his traveling shows, going around and not allowing them to perform in towns, communities. Same thing with our sports teams, our football teams, as they traveled, encountered discrimination even into the 1960s. We still encounter that. That's partly why we weren't allowed to join the Nebraska high school leagues until the 1960s. Schools objected because we had different children, races, and religions living here. So it's always been an ongoing battle at Boys Town to keep our standard of accepting all children of race or religion. But we always go back to Father Flanagan. He did it at a time of great hatred, and we continue that on today here in the village of Boys Town.
Mm-hmm. And if you visited the Boys Town Hall of History, you will see the big bus within the Hall of History. And that is what Father and his boys drove around when they had to travel very far for those sporting events because they couldn't play any Omaha teams. So if you haven't visited, make sure you come out and see it. And if you're not close to Omaha, we do have virtual tours on our website as well. Okay, so the next question, Heather, how did Father Flanagan's deep belief and efforts in integrating Boys Town serve as an example for the rest of America to follow in pursuing racial and religious equality and inclusion?
Yeah, he gives us a number of examples that I think any of us can do, actually. Even today, I think we can do them, and I think they would be really effective. You know, one thing, just to kind of pick up on what Tom was saying about the challenges that Father Flanagan encountered, was he was absolutely uncompromising where racism and religious discrimination were concerned. So wherever he saw it, even if it was from a donor, even if it was from, you know, the hotel that was supposed to lodge the football team and then said that nobody could stay there because it was a mixed group of kids. Even if it was from the United States government saying it's actually wrong on principle to incarcerate a group of people simply on the basis of their race and ethnicity. He was really consistent in that view, not in an angry, fiery way, you know, but just where there was racism, he pushed back against it, no matter who it was. And I would venture to say sometimes even if he had to make the calculation of this could actually be harder for me in the mission of creating Boys Town, and yet this is so important to me, I won't compromise on this. I could not find an incident anywhere where he compromised. But also on the day-to-day level, you know, not all of us can be the great exemplars of change in civil rights. I don't think in my lifetime I'm going to be Ella Baker or Martin Luther King, you know, or Malcolm X or Stokely Carmichael, or, you know, any of the wonderful, you know, I'm not Maya Angelou. I'm none of these voices. But what I am is a person in the world who encounters other people in the world, and how we connect with them every day. You know, do we greet them and we embrace them as one of us? Or do we size them up and decide where their compartment is? And when a child came to Boys Town and met Father Flanagan, didn't matter who they were. They were met with love. They were met with, you know, interest in who that child was as an individual. They often got candy from Father Flanagan's candy drawer, and it didn't matter who they were. I think any of us can do that, appreciating and approaching people with an openness, a curiosity, and an assumption that they are more like us and part of us than they are different from us and a potential problem for us. There's one other thing that Father Flanagan did as well that I think is really worth mentioning. And that is, he not only taught the kids, you know, to not be racist through his example and through just the way that they lived every day, but he also brought people to Boys Town. He brought people like the music teacher, Dan DeDune, who was an African-American musician, Patrick Okura, who was a Japanese-American psychologist. And these people, these men, were mentors and teachers to the kids of every race, including white kids, which was unheard of in that time. But it taught those kids, I can learn from anybody. Again, to sort of not see race as the salient fact, right? But to be able to take leadership and grow with anybody. And that's it. We can all grow together. And that's what Father Flanagan taught.
Yes. So today, Tom, how does Boys Town continue to implement Father Flanagan's inclusive values?
Boys Town, since our founding over 100 years ago, has continued the same policies Father Flanagan taught and showed us how to lead. Our boys and girls still live in homes mixed by race, age, and religion. They go to school together. They worship together. Our staff is a group of individuals from different backgrounds, different races, different religions, different ages, all here together working for the children of Boys Town. And again, it's been that way since our founding of Boys Town. As Heather mentioned, we had the Japanese internees here. After World War II, the home actually took in Holocaust survivors who stayed and worked here in the village of Boys Town too. So we've always had those diverse ideas and concepts. I always like to say many of these concepts are discussed. We've actually been living it here at Boys Town for 100 years. And we're a sustained community that shows living together with different backgrounds, different races, different religions is the future of America. And we're the future of America created by Father Flanagan over 100 years ago. And I would encourage people to come out and visit the village of Boys Town, learn what we're doing, come to the Hall of History. We have a Black History display in the museum right now, talking about the great individuals who've taught here at Boys Town or impacted our children of Boys Town. And people are always encouraged to come and learn more about our community.
Mm-hmm. Yes, please come visit. We would absolutely love to see you. Heather, is there anything else that you would like to mention in our discussion today on what stood out to you about Father Flanagan in your work?
I just think the foresight and the courage that Father Flanagan showed, the fact that he saw beyond the politics of the time and really helped us vision a better version of ourselves and a better version of America. I still really marvel at that fact when I think about where the United States was during the course of his lifetime. Again, the armed services, Black and white soldiers could not serve together in the same regiment until 1948. In my lifetime, it was not considered constitutionally, legal or constitutionally guaranteed that partners of different races could marry. That was 1967. And, here is Boys Town living as a family. And the thing that inspires me about that is not just the question of racial inclusion, although it does. And I think this is a model that, we can all draw from. But what can any of us see for our future? Where can any of us look beyond the stuff of the present day, the things that are just illusions, like race and like religious difference was? And can we use Father Flanagan's example of really envisioning a different, more just world if we just return to that simple principle that there's no such thing as a bad boy or a bad person. There's bad social environments. What can we do to undercut the bad things in the social environment to bring about so much of the good of what America was created to be, is meant to be? And if we work at it, we'll become.
Yes. And I think we can all work on it little by little. Just as you said, we don't have to be this big outward person like Malcolm X or MLK and those names you mentioned, but we all can do a little bit each day. So I appreciate that. Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. This has been one of my favorite chats. We've done a lot over the past 4 years for me, but this was very, very enjoyable, and I learned a lot, and I'm sure many people watching did. So thank you for joining.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, we have Heather's article linked above. If you're watching on Facebook, if you're watching on YouTube, I'll make sure to put it in the description so you can go ahead and read it. And thank you all so much for tuning in, and we will catch you next time. Have a good one.